that.
Right.
We ended up losing that game, and then we didn't lose another game until we lost to Jacksonville State.
Aren't they a powerhouse usually?
They were a powerhouse, and that came down to, that was the OVC championship game. But it's funny how it worked out. You know, I mean, we got the rings, we're the champions, but our bye week was the last week of the season, and we lost to Jacksonville State the week before the last week of the season. So they're in the driver's seat, you know, to win it all. All they got to do is beat Tennessee Tech the following week. And we were all watching the game on TV just to, you know, Tennessee Tech was like a 500 team. They weren't really, nothing special. And Jacksonville State, like you said, is a powerhouse. You know, I think they were ranked number 3. We were ranked number 5, and they were ranked number 3 when we played them, and we lost to them. So they're riding high, man. You know, they're trying to win a national title. And just so happens, man, Tennessee Tech pulled that game out, and they won the game, and that ended up putting us ahead to conference champions.
So you won it, yeah.
So we won it on our bye week, watching it on TV.
That's crazy.
But we won it, man.
How cool was that when that game was over? What was that
man,
like?
the phones were ringing. We were all everybody on the phone calling each other. Everybody, you know, immediately we all planned a big get together, and everybody got up together at Port Cape. I mean, like, that was the first ever. That was the first ever, championship. Now, now it's kind of more, they've won another one, so and been in the playoffs a couple times. Coach Toops really got it going, so it's kind of a bigger thing. But back in 2010, man, that was unexpected and rare. So it was
cool. Yeah. All right, so you graduate, and then so where'd the world take you then?
Rolla, Missouri.
Rolla, huh?
Rolla, Missouri. Yeah, it was Missouri S&T.
Okay.
That was one of the things where I was looking for a job. I didn't necessarily want to. At the time, I had done all this for a couple of years, so I'd had like this college coaching background, so I wanted to kind of keep pursuing that, and I didn't, want to teach high school or anything. And then so I put out a lot of resumes, got a lot of no's.
Yeah.
You know how that goes,
yeah.
man. You get a lot of no's, and all you need is that one yes. So,
yeah.
I put out there wasn't even really an opening at S&T.
Really?
I just sent the head coach an email with a resume, and he ended up emailing me back because he knew Tony Samuel, who's the head coach at SEMO. And so I went up there to Rolla and interviewed. And the guy, head coach at Missouri S&T was David Brown, who to this day, I mean, I was just texting him yesterday talking about two reading quarters and all that.
Uh-huh.
He is my career, professional mentor. I mean, he's a guy that, like, anytime I have a question about anything, I mean, that's my guy that I go to.
Mm-hmm.
And he just one of the best coaches that if not the best coach that I ever got to be around, as far as understanding his process and how we did everything, and we were so streamlined. And because you have to be streamlined at a place like Missouri S&T because it's an academic school.
Yeah.
I mean, academics is always first. It's definitely first at Missouri S&T.
Okay.
It's an engineering school. Sports is just a secondary thing, and but he was very detailed and streamlined in the process. Our practices were at 5:30 a.m. every day.
So y'all practice in the morning?
In the morning.
See, that's interesting because more than most, almost every other program, I'm sure, practices in the afternoon. So y'all practice at 5:30 in the morning?
In the morning. We had to because all of our kids had 8 o'clock classes. There was no exception to that. There was no, because like I said, these were kids that were going to be, chemical engineers, and things like that. So, I mean, they had to be at their 8 o'clock classes. So we had to be out of practice at 7:30. Sometimes we ran over and we just let those 8 o'clock kids go. Not everybody had an 8 o'clock class, but the majority had an 8 o'clock class.
How do you get athletes to come to a school where you're practicing at 5:30 in the morning and then kids are going to 8 o'clock? I mean, I know there's smart athletes, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that. But you know what I'm saying. How does that play into recruiting?
You hire a guy like David Brown because he got athletes that when Missouri S&T just released the all decade team, And so I was there in 2012. On that all-decade team, there were 6 guys on offense and 6 guys on defense, just from 2012.
Really?
Because of the people that he brought in he was there for 3 years, 4 years, and the kids that he brought in, he got these kids to buy into this idea at S&T that, like, you know, that we could be smart football players. You know, we could be guys that, you know, maybe weren't D1 caliber, but we could go to this D2 in Rolla, Missouri. And the biggest thing that he could do is that he could preach to these smart kids who were really, really good football players in high school, be like, hey, you come here, you're going to be making $75,000, $80,000 a year when you leave here.
Right.
So why not get to play a little football while you're doing it too? So you start getting those kids rolling in, and like at a place like S&T, man, like you don't have to worry about academics. That was never even on our radar. We had some kids, very few, that were having trouble in classes, but they were having trouble in classes that were very like tough classes. So
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
It wasn't like they were, you know, skipping out on fitness or,
Yeah.
you know, that they couldn't wake up, because we had them up. They were up. They didn't, you know, they missed class in the morning, and like we found out about it, it was a bad news bears for them.
A bit. So when you're practicing in the morning, when would these kids lift? In the afternoon?
They would get their lift in, about 4 o'clock, and so we would have it'd be like I said, everything was streamlined, man. We'd have practice in the morning. They would go to class in the morning after practice. They'd have class till about 1 or 1:30. We'd have different lifting groups, so they'd get a lift in, and then we had team meetings and position meetings at 4 and 4:30. So we would have our staff meetings after practice in order to, you know, get all that out of the way and get it done. And he was very like matter of fact in the staff meeting. Man, we sit down at the table. There was no, there was no talking about anything that didn't have to do with the staff meeting or the team. It
Really?
was, you know, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. Hey, we need to work on this all together.
Right.
And it was streamlined. Like as a college coach, I mean, yeah, we're getting up and practicing at 5:30, but our days were done at 4:30 every day. So I mean, then you kind of had time to, you know,
even as a college coach, that's crazy.
Get things together and do all that. And we went 10-1.
Really?
You know, so I mean, it worked.
It worked. So is that kind of where you say maybe you cut your teeth on this defense? Because you're kind of known now around the Boot Hill as a, you know, defensive coordinator guy. I mean, you were defensive coordinator at Kennett, and then I know, you know, you went to New Madrid now at Haytime, and we'll get to that. But would you say that, I know you said professionally, but would that be where you really picked up your style and your defense and everything like that?
Yeah, there was at S&T there was David Brown, who was the head coach, and he was our DB's coach. We called it DBU, you know, DB University. We had some top-notch guys that he recruited to come in, and he was a great defensive backs coach, and still is to this day. He's an athletic director down in Texas, Texas High School right now. But and then there was another guy that I'd worked more directly with. We shared an office together. His name was Brett Sykes, and the Psycho is what they call him. The Psycho. He was a defensive lineman at Ohio University, and so he played for Frank Solich and those guys, and just having that connection with them. But like working with those guys, like I said, that's where I really started to gain this, you know, defensive knowledge, because we had to run a specific type of defense at S&T. It was flex defense, and because of the kind of guys that we could recruit. So we took these guys that weren't necessarily, you know, they weren't 6 foot, you know, they weren't 220, and we could put them in a college football defense, and they could be successful because of how we lined up to things. And that's what, like, just watching them and learning how they picked things apart and really understanding what they were seeing. That's, yeah, man. And I mean, I still take those flex concepts and those, you know, and really try to put it into my game, because you may not always have the prototypical D lineman. You don't always have the prototypical linebacker, but you can put guys in positions where they can be successful that aren't necessarily like, you know, you're not a middle linebacker, but you're a, you know, you're a joker, you're a bandit, and you move them around.
Yeah. That's cool to be able to do that. I mean, I think that's I mean, that's got to be part of the key to success, especially when coaching. Like, you got to find a way to get the kids you have. You know, when you like let's say, you know, we're in high school and we can't recruit. You know, which is currently what we're doing. Like, even though technically right now both of our schools are blessed with very good athletes, but you know, I've been on the other end of that. You know, and you've got to try to find ways to be creative to get them in the right spot. And that's cool that you have a defense that's allowed for that. All right, so well, you're not at Northwest. You're not at S&T anymore. So did you? So were you taking classes there, or were you just coaching?
No,
What
I
happened there?
was just coaching there, and then like I said, I worked there for a year, and then like I said, David Brown's my mentor, everything like that. We went to a coaches convention. Well, before we went to the coaches convention, he was getting a lot of looks.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you go 10-1 at S&T, you probably
yeah,
gonna
he
get
was
some
getting,
people gonna pay attention.
he was getting a lot of looks, and then we found out that he was going to be the defensive backs coach at Fresno State.
Okay.
So, you know, the ride's kind of over for us because he can't, as just a position coach, can't pick up everybody and leave. Like, you know, we were kind of, he was looking at head coaching options and other D2s, and going to bring a portion of the staff with him. But you know, as the game goes, man, you get that big time D1 position coach. You know, we had to kind of break up and go our separate ways. But I went to a convention in Nashville, and we were all there together, and you know, everyone else was kind of job hunting, figuring things out, and I met a guy by the name of Kenny Evans, who was the head coach at Northeastern State University in Tahlequah, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And like I met him. This is no joke, man. I met him, and you know, he knew I was looking for a job, and it was like we sat and talked for probably 15 minutes, and then all of a sudden he just goes, "Well, I'm going to offer you a job." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's great." And he said, "But I need you out there in 3 days." So I went from Nashville to Raleigh and packed everything up, and then moved out to Oklahoma, like sight unseen. I knew where I was going with the GPS, but like I had never been out that way. I'd never heard of Tahlequah, Oklahoma.
Me either.
And I get out there, and that was it, man. Like he gave me a graduate assistant spot. And the funny thing is about that whole thing is like when we were sitting there talking, you know, when I met him, you know, we were kind of talking about defense and everything like that. That's what I had done.
Yeah.
And so I get out there to Oklahoma. I'm living in a hotel for a while, and then like living in the truck until I can find a place to live.
Mm-hmm.
Get a place to live. I'm all set up. I've been working there for about 2 weeks, and then he calls me into his office and he says, "Hey, I'm gonna make you the tight ends coach." And I was like, you know, it was one of the things where it kind of hits you, you know, because you're like, you don't really know how to take that, because I was thinking I was going to be the D-line coach, or helping with D-line as graduate assistant. And he said, if you want to be a defensive coordinator, you've got to be able to coach offense, and you got to understand how the offensive side works.
Right.
And the best part about it is like, as a defensive line GA, I was going to be helping somebody.
Yeah. When
I was the tight ends GA, I was helping our O-line coach, but I had my own. He wanted me to have my own position.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ran position meetings. I you know, had to have breakdowns. I had to be able to like offer something to the offensive staff meetings. So that was like my first time really doing that and being on that offensive side of the ball. So that really was like a game changer for me, because it was 2 years of coaching tight ends and fullbacks, and it changes your whole perception. You've been on both sides of the ball. You know what that's like. It changes your whole perception if you're able to coach both sides, and then you basically kind of know what that other side is telling those players.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So then you kind of are able to go back to defense and have a little upper hand.
I mean, it makes a huge difference. I mean, it's like, I swear to God, it's like a cheat code.
Yeah.
Like I feel bad for the people who don't get a chance to do that, because I mean, they're missing out. These guys are like, "Oh, I'm just this, man." What a way to! I mean, that is limiting
Once
yourself.
again, if you limit yourself to one side, you're missing out on so much, because there's so much information out there, you know,
Yeah.
like, you know, and now even like even with being at Hayti, like this year I'm helping coach wide receivers.
Yeah.
I didn't play wide receiver,
Yeah.
but I can, you know, I can learn it and I can coach it. And now, you know, it just helps make you be a better DB's coach.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely. I remember I was O lineman growing up and everything, and D-line too, and then, but when I became a head coach, I still did line for a while, but then eventually, you know, if you're calling the offense, you want your quarterback to know what's in your head. So I had somebody else. I was fortunate enough to have somebody else who played line, and I gave that to them. And then I coach quarterbacks, and if you guys know me, I can't throw the ball like 35 yards. I mean, it just is what it is. But I had some kids that are fortunate enough that were good, and this boy, you know, through a lot of different things, and we co-opted, and, you know, we had a guy who ultimately ended up calling offense. I mean, this kid, we coach quarterbacks, and he is in the Misha, I mean, he's in the record book for Misha for passing yards and all kinds of crazy stuff, which was a wild time in my life. But it's like you said, man, you gotta be willing to go where you're needed. I mean, you know, that's the thing. I'm just, I remember, like you said, being on the other side of it, and you're just like, it blows your mind. And I think the guy must have seen something in you, because why else would he have you do a position? I mean, his life's on the line for these things, you know. So he must have believed in you enough to give you that chance to sink or swim. And you know, I think that's the best way to learn. I mean, I know it's what if you sink, you know? But I mean, God, having that pressure on you most of the time, if you want it, you're gonna rise to the occasion.
Yep.
And so, I mean, so you spent 2 years there. So obviously, in the first year, you must have rose to the occasion because you got a chance to do it again.
Yeah, actually had 2 guys that were all MIAA. You know, so what you know in MIAA, man, it's
dude, that's a murderer's row of schools between Northwest and Pitt State and sometimes Missouri Western.
You got Central Missouri is always
oh
tough.
yeah, Central Missouri. They usually have real good offense in
Yeah,
Central
and,
Missouri. Yeah.
Washburn.
Yeah.
Missouri Southern. I mean, it's just like, I mean, you can just go through the whole gauntlet, man. And
it's like the SEC of Division II,
it's
man.
as tough as
God.
it gets. It's as tough as it gets.
We used to go every year to Northwest Team Camp at there in Maryville, Missouri, and you talk about I mean, there's a reason they win, but them dudes up there, it is a class act. I mean, they are. I don't know how it is out on the field when you're playing and being competitive, but like when we go to their camp and everything, I mean, it was something else. I mean, they had some guys up there that were great coaches we got to meet. Right now, Rich Wright's their coach, and he's been their defensive coordinator. I don't know if he's still doing it or not, but I mean, that dude is a genius. I mean, they had some other guys up there, Joe Osborne. Scott Bostwick was the guy that I really liked the most. He passed away, but you talk about a dude who was so nice, but you could tell like he's so just competitive and stuff. I remember we'd go to the coaches. They had this thing where you get to go eat wings after the camp, and they had the best dang wings, and they had like a beer cart, and you know, you'd be hot all day, and you know, at that point anything wet would taste good. You know, you're just like, oh my God. But then, you know, and I just felt like, and I was a head coach, and I was like 24, 25 years old. And I'm getting to go back out here. Like, so I was so young when I got to be a head coach. They were like, when you'd go sit in the coaches meetings in there and they would hand out the schedules for today's camp, they would always hand it to one of my assistants. And, you know, because it was just, because I'm like this little puppy dog sitting here, you know.
You were super young.
Yeah, I mean, hell, you learn stuff. I mean, I wasn't, if I knew half of what I know now then, I would have done things different and better. And, but yeah, I mean, so that's crazy just how I remember doing that. And so Tahlequah, Oklahoma, 2 years out there. And then, well, we're here in the Boot Hill, and you've been here for a while now. So how do you get from freaking Oklahoma out there, wild man, GA, coaching defense, you know, meeting all these people? How the heck do you end up coming back here?
Man, you know, I wanted to come home, man. You know, it's like one of the things where you kind of, you go out and you see it, and you work it a little bit, and you kind of gain some knowledge, and then there comes a point where it's like, you know, all right, it's time to go home now. It's time to, like, you know, the college way is a gauntlet in itself, and it is not for the faint of heart. I mean, there's things that can happen, you know, in a college staff that just changes. You're talking about changing people's lives at the drop of a hat. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, there's things that go on, and you really learn that, like, there really is no job security. And you know, everybody has that dream of trying to make it to the top, and be Dabo Sweeney or Nick Saban and all that. But that road is rough. You're recruiting all the time. You're on the road all the time. You're doing, you know, you're coaching your position. You're trying to make sure you're winning. You're trying to make sure you're bringing guys in. You're trying, you know, it's constant. And there's just, in the end of it, there's just not a whole lot of job security. So I decided that I wanted to come home, and then that was in 2015. I was at Sykeston, working for the legend Kent Gibbs, you know.
Yeah, dude's won a lot. He's at Cape now, right?
He's at Cape now, and he's been around a lot. And
he, you know, I was saying, this is funny. I was saying, like, people were like, you know, I was so young, you know. It's kind of the same deal for Gibbs. Like, when you see him, like, he's freaking tiny.
Yeah.
Like, I seen him, like, until you know who he is, you're going,
who is that guy?
Who is that guy? What's that old guy doing walking around out there, you know? And then he's won, like, a bajillion games, you know, and he's a good dude, and you meet him, and you're like, oh, okay, I can get it. But until then, you're like, at least I was, you know, here I am, you know.
And fun fact, Kent Gibbs was actually, his first head coaching job was at Hayti.
Really?
Yeah, and he was the first person to take Hayti to the state finals. They didn't win it, but he was the first coach to take them to the state finals. Yeah, and so he's been around, man.
I gotta say, Hayti and Sykes. Didn't he spend some time at Fredericktown as well?
He was at Fredericktown for most of his career.
They had some good teams up there. God, some big linemen. I remember playing against some dudes up there. Huge, Rayfield, man.
Yeah, and he, like I said, man, he once again though, it came down to, like, I remember thinking, you know, too, it's like I'd done a little bit of college ball, I'd been around, and I was trying to come back home, and it really